Out, the manager spat, knuckles white around his phone. But here's the thing, he didn't see a vagrant, just a disruption to his precious five-star sheen. Security lumbered forward. Another injustice served. A flicker of linen, almost invisible against the marble. And Isabella saw something different. Not the dust, but the threads. Not the poverty, but the story etched on that tired face. She knew somehow this wasn't about to be just another expulsion. This was about dignity. This was about to be about a billion-dollar deal going south, fast. And they had no idea. It was her quiet act of rebellion that would set the whole damn thing alight. That's the secret, see? Her kindness? It's a weapon. She saw a man who was thirsty. This is the incredible true story of how a simple cup of tea offered in a forgotten language exposed a billion-dollar secret and unraveled an empire of prejudice, changing 3 lives forever. The revolving doors of the Grand Excelsior Hotel on Park Lane spun with a hushed, expensive whisper, depositing financiers in tailored suits and erises draped in cashmere onto the polished marble floors. It was a world of quiet opulence, where the air itself seemed to smell of money and lemon-scented polish. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, the meticulously curated tranquility was about to be disturbed. A man shuffled through the doors, looking profoundly out of place. He wasn't dressed in a bespoke suit, but in a simple dust-caked linen tunic over loose-fitting trousers. His sandals were worn, and his face etched with the deep lines of fatigue, and sun was framed by a graying beard. He carried no designer luggage, only a single oddly shaped case wrapped in worn leather, its contours suggesting a musical instrument from a land far from London. He approached the reception desk, a monolithic slab of mahogany helmed by a young woman named Chloe. Her smile, practiced and perfect, faltered for a fraction of a second as she took in his appearance. "Good afternoon, sir. How may I help you?" she asked, her voice a pitch higher than usual. The man leaned forward, his dark eyes clouded with exhaustion. "Booking," he said, his English thick with an accent she couldn't place. "I have booking." "Of course, sir." And the name, Chloe typed her fingers expectantly over the keyboard. Al-Jamil Khalid. Al-Jamil. She typed it in. A small, polite frown creased her brow. She tried again, varying the spelling. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't seem to have anything under that name. Perhaps it was booked under a different name. A company name, perhaps." The man shook his head, a flicker of frustration crossing his face. "No, my name Alge, the Royal Suite." Chloe's professional composure almost cracked. The Royal Suite, their most exclusive accommodation, a sprawling penthouse that cost more per night than her annual salary. It was currently reserved for a major investor from the Gulf, a booking handled with the utmost discretion and flagged with alerts for VIP treatment. This man could not possibly be that guest. "I'm very sorry, sir," she said, her tone shifting from polite to firm. "There must be a mistake. There is no booking under that name." From a glass-walled office behind the reception, the hotel manager, Julian Harrison, had been observing the exchange. Harrison was a man who prided himself on maintaining the hotel's pristine image. He was impeccably dressed with a sharp suit, a sharper haircut, and a smile that never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes. He saw the disheveled man, the receptionist's discomfort, and the curious glances from other guests. This was a stain on his perfect canvas. He emerged from his office, gliding across the marble like a shark. "Is there a problem here, Chloe?" he asked, his voice smooth, but with an undercurrent of steel. He didn't look at the guest, addressing only his employee. "This gentleman," Chloe said, the word catching in her throat, "insists he has a booking for the Royal Suite, Mr. Harrison, but there's nothing in the system under his name." Harrison finally turned his gaze upon Khalid Al-Jil, his eyes sweeping over the man from his worn sandals to his tired face in a single dismissive motion. He saw a threat to the hotel's exclusivity. "Sir," Harrison began, his voice dripping with condescension, "I believe you have the wrong establishment. Perhaps you're looking for a hostel. There are several more affordable options eastward." Khalid's eyes narrowed. He understood the tone, if not every word. "No, this hotel, my booking. Check again." His frustration was making his limited English even more broken. He gestured towards his instrument case. I am Tor. Long travel. Harrison's eyes locked onto the case. It was foreign, unfamiliar, and in his mind, suspicious. And what is that exactly? He asked, a new edge to his voice. Hot policy is quite strict about what can be brought onto the premises. Is oud? Khalid said, touching the case protectively. Music. I'm afraid we'll need to see what's inside, Harrison stated flatly. For security. This was the final indignity. The man's face, already weary, hardened into a mask of quiet fury. He had been patient. He had been tired. Now he was insulted. He began to speak, his voice low and guttural, the words tumbling out, not in English, but in his native Arabic. It was a torrent of frustration, a complaint about his long journey, the disrespect, the exhaustion, the simple request for the room he had paid a fortune for. To Chloe and Harrison, it was just angry, foreign noise. Right, that's it. Harrison snapped, his faux patience gone. He's becoming aggressive. Chloe, call security. Have him escorted out immediately. Chloe reached for the phone, her hand trembling slightly. Other guests were now openly staring at the commotion, their whispers like the rustling of dry leaves. The reputation of the Grand Excelsior was being tarnished with every passing second. The tired old man was no longer just a nuisance. He was a spectacle. Tucked away in a service corridor just off the main lobby, Isabella Rossi was polishing silverware, each fork and spoon a small repetitive motion that allowed her mind to wander. From her vantage point, through a sliver of open doorway, she had a partial view of the grand reception area. She had noticed the man the moment he walked in. While the staff saw dust and poverty, she saw the fine hand-woven linen of his tunic, the kind of material that cost a fortune in niche markets, but looked unassuming to the untrained eye. She saw the exhaustion of a traveler who had crossed continents, a look she recognized from her own father's face years ago. Isabella was not just a waitress. It was a role she played out of necessity, a costume she wore to pay for her mother's mounting medical bills. In another life, a life before a tragic accident had shattered her family's finances. She was a scholar. She held a master's degree in art history and Middle Eastern studies from Cambridge, a degree that now sat uselessly in a folder under her bed. Her father, Dr. Alistista Rossi, had been a celebrated cultural attaché stationed in Damascus for over a decade before the war. It was there Isabella had spent her childhood, in a world scented with jasmine and cardamom, her days filled with the melodies of the Arabic language and the intricate beauty of Islamic art. She didn't just speak Arabic. She understood its nuances, its poetry, the deep-seated cultural codes of honor and hospitality it carried. The outcase the man was clutching. She knew its sound, the soulful, resonant hum that her father used to say was the very voice of the desert. She watched the scene at the reception unfold with a growing sense of dread. She saw Chloe's panic and Mr. Harrison's sneering superiority, and then she heard it. The man pushed to his limit, switched to Arabic. Isabella froze, the polishing cloth still in her hand. It wasn't just any Arabic. It was a formal, slightly classical dialect with the distinct inflections of the Gulf. He wasn't being aggressive. He was lamenting. She could hear the words clearly carried across the marble by the lobby's acoustics. After a journey of 20 hours, this is the welcome. This is the famed English hospitality I ask only for what is mine, for the room I have secured. I am treated like a beggar, a thief. My name is on the reservation, my company's name. Is it so difficult to show a tired man a shred of dignity? Dignity. That was the word that struck Isabella like a bell. This wasn't a transaction for him. It was a matter of respect. Mr. Harrison, hearing only a foreign tirade, was now signaling for security. Two large men in black suits began moving towards the lobby from their post by the entrance. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to stay hidden. She was a nobody here, a waitress on a zero contract. Interfering was professional suicide. Mr. Harrison was a vindictive man who had fired staff for far less. She needed this job. Her mother's care depended on it. Getting involved was reckless, stupid, and utterly pointless. He was going to be thrown out anyway. But then she saw the man's face again. She saw the profound weariness in his eyes, the deep-seated insult etched into his features. And in that moment, he wasn't a stranger. He was a reflection of her father, of the warm, honorable people who had hosted her family in Damascus, who believed that a guest was a gift from God, whose homes were always open, and whose first offering was always a glass of sweet tea. The image of two burly security guards putting their hands on this dignified old man was too much to bear. It felt like a betrayal of her entire past, a violation of the most sacred rules of hospitality she had been taught. Her mind raced. What could she do? Arguing with Harrison was pointless. Explaining to the guards would be impossible. She had to do something that would cut through the noise, something that would speak directly to the man to show him that someone in this cold marble palace understood. An idea simple and yet terrifyingly bold sparked in her mind. It was a gamble, a massive career-ending gamble. But as the security guards took another step forward, she knew she had to take it. Wiping her hands on her apron, Isabella pushed open the service door and stepped out of the shadows. Isabella moved with a purpose that turned heads. She ignored the confused look from Chloe, the furious glare from Mr. Harrison, and the curious stars of the guests. She walked not towards the reception desk but past it, heading directly for the small, elegant beverage station in the lobby lounge, which was technically her designated work area. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, but her mind was a whirlwind of panic and resolve. She took a delicate porcelain cup and saucer. She selected a sachet of premium Moroccan mint tea, the most fragrant and soothing blend the hotel offered. She filled the kettle with filtered water, and as it heated, arranged a small dish with sugar cubes and a sliver of lemon, just as she had seen her father's host do 1,000 times. Mr. Harrison strode towards her, his face a mask of thunder. "What in God's name do you think you're doing, Rossi?" He hissed, his voice low and venomous, so as not to cause a bigger scene. "I gave you an order to stay in the back. Security is handling this." Isabella didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on the kettle, waiting for it to boil. "I'm preparing a beverage for a guest, Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "He is not a guest. He is a trespasser. He is being removed. Now get back to your station before I fire you on the spot." The kettle clicked off. Isabella calmly poured the steaming water over the tea leaves, letting the fragrant aroma of mint fill the air. She let it steep for a moment, her actions deliberate and calm, a stark contrast to the tension crackling around them. She knew this was her last act as an employee of the Grand Excelsior. So be it. With the tea perfectly brewed, she placed it all on a small silver tray. Holding it with both hands, she turned and walked toward the reception desk towards the man who now stood cornered between the mahogany desk and the two approaching security guards. She stopped a respectful distance from him. The man, Khalid al-Jamil, looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of suspicion and confusion. He expected her to be another part of the hotel machine coming to eject him. Isabella took a small, steadying breath. She looked him directly in the eye, offering a slight respectful bow of her head. And then in the same formal, clear Arabic, he had used the language of her childhood, she spoke. "Tafadal Yasai," she said, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the tense silence of the lobby. "Please, sir." The effect was instantaneous. It was as if the world had tilted on its axis. The man's weary, angry expression dissolved, replaced by one of utter, profound shock. His eyes widened, and for the first time a light seemed to flicker within their exhausted depths. The security guards paused, confused. Mr. Harrison stared, his mouth agape. Isabella continued, her voice gaining confidence. "A cup of mint tea to soothe your nerves after your long journey. Please accept our hospitality." She used the formal hour as if speaking for the entire hotel, a silent rebuke to her manager. She held the tray out to him. For a long moment, Khalid al-Jam simply stared at her, then at the cup of tea. It was more than a beverage. It was a symbol in his culture. To be offered tea was to be welcomed, to be seen, to be respected. It was an olive branch in a sea of hostility. After all the suspicion and disrespect, this one small act of culturally fluent kindness was a lifeline. Slowly, as if in a dream, he reached out a slightly trembling hand and took the cup. He looked from her face to the steaming liquid, and a single heavy sigh escaped his lips. The sigh of a man who had been fighting a battle and had just found an unexpected ally. He didn't drink. He just held the warm cup, its heat seeping into his hands. He looked back at Isabella, and in a quiet, formal voice, he asked her in Arabic, What is your name? My daughter Isabella, sir, she replied in the same language. Isabella, he repeated softly. You are the only person in this entire building who seems to understand what hospitality means. Mr. Harrison, utterly bewildered, stepped forward. What is going on? What are you saying to him? He demanded, his authority slipping away with every word of the foreign tongue he couldn't comprehend. Khaled al-Jamil ignored him completely. His focus was entirely on Isabella. He took a small sip of the tea, the warmth seeming to fortify him. His posture straightened. The weary traveler began to recede, and in his place someone else began to emerge, a man of quiet, unshakable authority. Isabella, he said, his voice now calm and measured. Would you be so kind as to translate for these people? It seems my English is not sufficient for them. He had just handed her all the power, and in doing so, he had sealed Julian Harrison's fate. The lobby of the Grand Excelsior seemed to hold its breath. The dynamic had shifted so completely, so suddenly, that everyone was left reeling. The two security guards hovered uncertainly. Chloe stood frozen behind the desk, and Harrison's face was a mottled patchwork of red and white confusion, wearing with fury. The power in the room now flowed through Isabella, the waitress who stood as a bridge between two worlds. Sir, Isabella said, turning to Mr. Harrison, but keeping her tone respectful. Mr. Algil would like me to translate. He says his English is not clear enough at the moment. Harrison scoffed, trying to reclaim control. Translate what? Tell him security is here to escort him off the property. That's all he needs to know. Isabella turned back to Khaled and translated the manager's hostile words accurately without softening the blow. Khaled listened, his expression impassive. He took another sip of tea before replying in calm, flowing Arabic. Isabella, please ask the receptionist to check the reservation again, he said. The booking for the royal suite. It is not under my personal name. It is under a corporate holding name. The letters are KAJKA Holdings. It was booked 3 months ago and paid for in full in advance for 1 month. Isabella turned to Chloe, whose eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and dawning comprehension. Chloe, please check the system for a reservation for the royal suite under the name KAJ Holdings. Hesitantly, Chloe's fingers flew across the keyboard. The entire lobby was silent, save for the soft tapping of the keys. After a few seconds, she stopped. Her face went completely pale. She looked up first at Mr. Harrison, then at Isabella, her eyes like a deer caught in headlights. I've found it, she whispered, her voice barely audible. KJ Holdings, the royal suite, booked for 31 nights prepaid. Total charge $744,000. She swallowed hard. There's a note on the file. Holder is the principal investor and CEO. Afford all courtesies. Highest priority guest. The figure hung in the air, stunning the opulent lobby into a deeper silence. $744,000. It was a sum so vast, so astronomical, that it seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room. Mr. Harrison looked as if he'd been punched in the gut. His carefully constructed world of appearances and judgment had just crumbled into dust. The vagrant, the trespasser he was about to have thrown into the street, was the most important guest the hotel had seen in a decade. Khaled spoke again in Arabic, his voice still quiet, yet it carried the weight of thunder. Please tell the manager, he said to Isabella, that his courtesies have been noted. Also, please ask him why he demanded to inspect my personal property as if I were a common criminal. This oud was a gift to my father, from his father. It is a priceless family heirloom, not a security threat. Isabella translated, her voice clear and steady. Each word was a nail in Harrison's professional coffin. The manager's face, which had been pale, now began to turn a sickly shade of green. He opened his mouth, but only a strangled croak came out. It was a misunderstanding. He stammered, his eyes pleading now. A security precaution. Standard procedure. Khaled cut him off with a simple, sharp Arabic phrase to Isabella. He says, Isabella translated, looking directly at Harrison, that true quality is not in the polish on the floor, but in the character of the men who walk on it. He has found your character to be lacking. The quiet dignity of the insult was more devastating than any shout. Harrison visibly deflated the arrogance and authority, draining out of him, leaving a hollowed-out man in an expensive suit. Khalid Alj then set his teacup down gently on the tray Isabella was still holding. He looked around the lobby at the gawking guests and the terrified staff. His gaze was no longer that of a tired traveler, but of a king surveying a territory he was displeased with. "Isabella," he said, his voice soft again, "please have someone take my things to my suite. And you, I would like you to accompany me. I find your company refreshing." He then looked at Chloe, who was still trembling. "And you, young lady, a word of advice. Learn to look at a person's eyes, not their shoes. The eyes tell the truer story." With that, he walked past the reception desk, past the now useless security guards, and towards the private elevator reserved for the penthouse suites. He didn't look back. Isabella stood for a moment in the wreckage of the confrontation. She felt 100 pairs of eyes on her. Then she made a choice. She handed the tray with the teacup to a stunned bellboy, gave Mr. Harrison one last unreadable look, and followed her new employer into the elevator, the doors closing with a soft final chime. The royal suite was less of a hotel room and more of a palace in the sky. It spanned 2 floors with panoramic windows offering breathtaking views of Hyde Park and the London skyline. The air was still and cool, the silence a stark contrast to the chaos in the lobby below. A team of staff, hastily summoned by a frantic Chloe, had already brought up Khalid's luggage, several large unassuming trunks that had been delivered separately the day before, and his precious Aoud case, which now rested on a velvet chaise lounge. Khalid walked through the opulent rooms, his worn sandals silent on the plush silk carpets. He showed no sign of being impressed by the gilded furniture or the modern art on the walls. He seemed to be looking for something else, a substance beneath the style. Isabella stood awkwardly by the door, her waitress apron suddenly feeling like a ridiculous costume. She felt she was trespassing in 2 worlds at once, his and this suite's. "Please, Isabella, come in. Sit," he said, gesturing to a sofa. He spoke in English now, his accent still present, but his grammar suddenly flawless, his vocabulary extensive. The broken English in the lobby had been a choice, not a limitation. It was a part of his test. He went to the minibar, ignored the champagne, and poured 2 glasses of still water. He handed one to her. "I owe you my gratitude," he said, his dark eyes meeting hers. "You showed me kindness when all I received was suspicion. May I ask, how does a waitress at the Grand Excelsior come to speak such perfect formal Arabic?" Isabella, feeling a strange mix of nervousness and relief, told him everything. She spoke of her father, the cultural attaché, of her childhood in Damascus, the university degree she could no longer use, her mother's illness, and the mountain of debt that had led her to polishing silverware in a city that had forgotten her skills. She spoke not with self-pity, but with a simple factual weariness. Khalid listened intently, his gaze never leaving her face. He nodded slowly, as if her story confirmed something he already suspected. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "The world often discards its greatest treasures," he said finally. "A priceless instrument is seen as a threat. A scholar of culture is made to serve drinks. It is a world turned upside down." He walked over to the window, looking down at the city below. "Do you know why I am in London, Isabella?" "For a vacation, I assume, sir." He gave a short, dry laugh. "I have not had a vacation in 20 years. No, I am here to work. KJ Holdings is my company. We are one of the largest private investment firms in the Middle East. We specialize in luxury hospitality, among other things. We build and acquire hotels across the globe." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "I'm in London to make my company's most significant European acquisition to date. I am here to buy a flagship hotel, a landmark, a crown jewel for our portfolio." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Isabella's mind was racing, trying to process the scale of what he was saying. "The Grand Excelsior," he continued, "was at the very top of my list. Its history, its location. On paper, it is perfect. But I do not buy paper, Isabella. I buy character. I buy a soul. So I have a tradition. Before any major acquisition, I visit the property myself unannounced. I arrive looking as I did today to see how I am treated. I test the foundations. Is the hospitality genuine, Or is it merely a shallow performance for the wealthy? Does the staff serve with dignity or with judgment? He gestured around the magnificent suite. Today, the Grand Excelsia gave me my answer. They failed spectacularly. Isabella felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just about a mishandled reservation. This was a billion-dollar deal that had just been scuttled by a snobbish manager and a frightened receptionist. That man, Mr. Harrison, Khaled said with a wave of his hand. He did not just insult me. He cost his employer, Lord Ashworth, the sale of this hotel. A sale that would have been worth nearly $1 billion. He looked directly at Isabella, a sharp, intelligent glint in his eye. But a failed test can still yield valuable results. It has shown me exactly what is wrong with the Western luxury model. It is cold. It is arrogant. It lacks a heart. He walked back towards her, his demeanor shifting from that of a guest to a CEO. It also yielded something else. It yielded you, a person with a master's degree in culture, who understands the true meaning of hospitality, who is wasting her talents because the world is blind. He stopped in front of her. I am withdrawing my offer for this hotel, but my mission in London is not over. I will find another. And when I do, I will build it into something better, something that combines the best of Western efficiency with the soul of Eastern hospitality. His next words would change her life. Isabella Rossi, I do not need a translator. I need a mind like yours. I need someone who understands art culture and, most importantly, dignity. I am offering you a job, not as a waitress, not as a personal assistant. I want to hire you as the new director of cultural experience for KJ Holdings European division. You will work with me directly to shape the soul of our new venture. Your starting salary will be $150,000 per year, plus bonuses. We will, of course, take care of your mother's medical expenses, all of them. Isabella could not speak. The number, the title, the offer, it was all too vast to comprehend. Tears welled in her eyes, tears of shock, of relief, of a decade of frustration washing away in a single moment. It was impossible. It was a dream. But the look in the eyes of the man in front of her was very, very real. You offered me a cup of tea, Isabella, he said softly. I am now offering you a future. Do we have a deal? The story of the confrontation in the lobby descended upon the staff of the Grand Excelsia. Not like a whisper, but like a change in atmospheric pressure. It was a silent, crackling energy that passed from the wide-eyed bellhops to the gossiping kitchen porters, from the shaken housekeeping staff to the pale-faced concierge. The narrative took on a mythical quality, with each retelling the millionaire who looked like a porpoise, the manager's cataclysmic misjudgment, and the sudden ascension of Isabella Rossi, the quiet waitress from the morning shift, who had apparently checkmated the king of their small castle with nothing more than a foreign phrase and a cup of tea. In his glass-walled office, Julian Harrison was living through the longest afternoon of his life. The initial shock had given way to a frantic, sweating panic. He was a man drowning in a sea of expensive mahogany and polished brass. His world was built on a rigid hierarchy of appearances, and his own finely tuned senses had betrayed him, leading him to commit the ultimate sin. In his profession, he had insulted a man with more money than God. His first instinct was damage control. He grabbed the phone and dialed the extension for the royal suite. It rang once before a clipped, unfamiliar voice answered. Mr. Al Giles, Private Security. Who is this? The voice was cold, impersonal, and utterly impenetrable. This is Julian Harrison, the hotel manager, he said, trying to inject an authority into his voice that he no longer felt. I need to speak with Mr. Al Jamil immediately to offer my sincerest apologies. Mr. Al Jamil is not accepting calls, the voice replied flatly. A message has been left for all hotel staff. He is not to be disturbed. Is that understood? The line went dead. Stunned, Harrison tried a different approach. He summoned the head of room service with a frantic energy that bordered on hysteria. Get me a bottle of the 1998 Krug Close Damon, he ordered, naming the most obscenely expensive champagne in their cellar, a bottle that cost $4,000, and have the floral department create their largest, most extravagant arrangement, orchids, roses, everything. Send it to the royal suite immediately with a card with the deepest and most profound apologies of the management. 20 minutes later, the sommelier returned pushing a trolley. On it was the unopened bottle of champagne and the ostentatious floral display looking garish and absurd under the fluorescent lights of the service corridor. "It was sent back, sir," the young man reported, avoiding Harrison's gaze. "The security details said, and I quote, 'Mr. Algie has no need of your trinkets.'" Each rejection was another shovel of dirt on his professional grave. Harrison slumped in his chair. The carefully constructed facade of the unflappable manager, crumbling to reveal the terrified, inadequate man beneath. He stared out at the lobby, his kingdom, which now felt like the scene of his own execution. The final summons came not as a shout, but as a quiet, chilling phone call from Lord Ashworth's personal secretary. "Mr. Harrison, Lord Ashworth would like to see you in the main boardroom now." The tone was furial. The walk to the boardroom felt like a mile. As he passed his staff, their averted eyes and sudden silence were his verdict. He was already a ghost. He pushed open the heavy oak doors. Lord Ashworth was standing by the large window, looking down at Park Lane. The older man didn't turn around for a full minute, letting the silence stretch until it was suffocating. "Julian." Lord Ashworth finally said, his voice as cold and gray as the London sky. "I've been in this business for 50 years. I have seen managers make mistakes. I have seen scandals. I have seen fires, floods, and bomb threats. But in all that time, I have never ever seen one man cause so much catastrophic damage in the space of 15 minutes. He turned his eyes like chips of ice. "I just got off the telephone with Khaled Al-Jamil. We've known each other for years. Did you know that we've sat on charitable boards together? A man of immense dignity and principle. He called me personally as a courtesy," he said before his office released a statement. He felt I should hear it from him first. Harrison began to stammer. "My lord, it was a terrible mistake, a security concern. I misread the situation. I take full responsibility. Misread the situation." Ashworth roared, his aristocratic composure finally snapping. "You didn't misread it. You never read it at all. You judged a man by his clothes. You, the manager of one of the most prestigious hotels in the world. For 6 months, Julie and our legal and finance teams have been working day and night on a landmark deal. A quiet acquisition of this hotel group's parent company by KJ Holdings. It would have secured our future for the next century. Khaled's visit today was the final step, a formality, his personal sign-off on a deal worth nearly £1 billion. Lord Ashworth stepped closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "And you offered to call him a hostile. You tried to confiscate a priceless family heirloom. You were going to have him thrown out like a dog. You didn't just insult a guest, Julian. You vaporized a £1 billion deal. You've made this hotel and by extension me a laughingstock." "I can fix it," Harrison pleaded, tears now welling in his eyes. "I will beg his forgiveness." "Forgiveness won't bring back the deal," Ashworth said with brutal finality. "He's already moved on. The deal is dead, and so is your career. Clear out your desk. I want you out of this building within the hour. Security will escort you. You are terminated effective immediately." While Harrison's world was ending, Isabella's was beginning. In the serene, silent opulence of the royal suite, a world away from the chaos below, she sat at a polished rosewood desk. In front of her was a thick cream-colored document with the elegant KAJ Holdings letterhead. It was an employment contract. Her hands, which just that morning had been chapped from hot water and cleaning chemicals, now held a pen worth more than her old weekly salary. She read the title, Director of Cultural Experience European Division, and a dizzying wave of vertigo washed over her. She signed her name, the ink flowing smoothly onto the page. With that simple motion, she signed away a life of debt, of worry, of untapped potential. She was no longer Isabella the waitress. She was Isabella Rossi, the executive. Her first act, the one that mattered more than anything, was deeply personal. Khaled, sensing her need, had discreetly moved to the other side of the vast living room, giving her privacy. She took out her worn mobile phone and dialed the number of the private care facility where her mother, Elena, was staying. She knew the number by heart, a number synonymous with anxiety and monthly financial dread. A familiar business-like voice answered, "Highgate Meadows Care, Brenda speaking." Hello, Brenda. It's Isabella Rossi, Elena Rossi's daughter. Ah, yes, Isabella. Brenda's tone was polite, but held a familiar edge of caution, the tone one uses with a client who is perpetually behind on payments. I was actually going to call you this week about last month's, that's why I'm calling. Isabella interrupted, her voice trembling but clear. I'd like to settle my mother's entire outstanding balance right now, and I would also like to prepay for the next 12 months. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Isabella could hear the faint clicking of a keyboard. The entire balance, Isabella, that's over $40,000. I'm aware, Isabella said, a tear of pure relief tracing a path down her cheek. I can give you a corporate credit card number now. Furthermore, I'd like to upgrade my mother's care plan, effective immediately. I want her in your largest private suite, the one with the garden view. I want a dedicated 24-hour specialist nurse, and I want you to arrange consultations with the top neurologists in the city, regardless of cost. Whatever she needs, she is to have it. The administrator was speechless. The professional frost in her voice melted away, replaced by genuine astonishment. Of course, Miss Rosie. Of course, I'll arrange everything immediately. Ending the call, Isabella finally let the tears flow freely, a silent, shoulders-shaking catharsis that washed away years of fear. She had not just secured her own future, she had secured her mother's dignity and comfort. Across the room, Khaled finished his own phone call. His conversation had been in quiet, decisive English, devoid of emotion, but radiating power. He had not been speaking to lawyers or brokers, but directly to the owner of the Beaumont, the Grand Excelsior's most elegant and formidable rival. He hung up and looked at Isabella, his expression calm. The consequences of this afternoon continue to unfold, he said. Lord Ashworth will soon learn that his loss is another's gain. I have just extended an offer to purchase the Beaumont Hotel, a significant premium above its market value. They have accepted. We will complete the transaction by the end of the week. It was a breathtaking move, a swift, surgical, and utterly ruthless act of business that sent a shockwave through the industry. He walked over to the desk and laid a thick, leather-bound portfolio in front of her. On the cover, embossed in gold, was the single word Beaumont. This is your first project, Isabella, he said, his voice now that of a CEO mentoring his new director. Your predecessor, Mr. Harrison, saw a building. I want you to see a home. He saw customers. I want you to see guests. He saw an asset. I want you to find its soul. Go through this. Then tomorrow you and I will walk through the hotel. I want your analysis, not as an employee, but as a scholar. Tell me its history, its character, its ghosts. Tell me how we make it not just the most luxurious hotel in London, but the most human. Isabella placed her hand on the portfolio. Its solid weight was the feeling of a new reality, a new purpose. The consequences of this day had been brutal for some, but for her, they were the beginning of everything. The following morning, there was no uniform, no apron, no scent of industrial polish. Isabella stood before the mirror in her small flat and saw a stranger looking back, a woman dressed not in the black and white of servitude, but in a simple, elegant wool coat she had purchased that morning. It was a deliberate choice. Today was not about being an executive. It was about being an observer, a scholar. Today she began her archaeological dig into the soul of the Beaumont Hotel. As she approached the grand colonnaded entrance, a doorman with a kind, weathered face and a straight back greeted her with a polite, "Good morning." She was not a VIP, not a recognized regular, just an anonymous woman walking in off the street. Yet the welcome was genuine. This, she noted immediately, was a place with better bones than the Excelsior. The foundation was solid, but as she stepped into the vast cathedral-like lobby, she sensed what Khaled meant. It was beautiful, immaculate, and utterly cold. The lobby was a masterpiece of Edwardian design with soaring ceilings and intricate plasterwork, but the art was generic, expensive landscapes that said nothing. The music was a forgettable classical loop, sterile and impersonal. The staff at the desks were flawlessly efficient, their smiles perfect, their movements precise, but they operated like finely tuned automatons. They were performing luxury, not embodying hospitality. Isabella spent the entire day walking the hotel portfolio in hand. She wasn't looking at it as a manager assessing profit centers. She was reading it like a text. She sat in the lounge ordering only a coffee and watched the silent dance of transactions. She saw wealthy guests being catered to with practiced deference. But she also saw a young family with a tired child being treated with a subtle, almost imperceptible impatience. She saw a maintenance worker being spoken down to by a junior manager in a service corridor. The sickness of hierarchy. The judgment that had poisoned the excelsia existed here too, albeit in a more subtle, insidious form. Her breakthrough came in the late afternoon when she struck up a conversation with the elderly doorman who had first greeted her. His name was Arthur, and he had worked at the Beaumont for 42 years. She didn't introduce herself as his new boss. She simply asked him about the hotel's history. His eyes lit up. He told her stories of visiting film stars from the 60s, of diplomats hashing out secret deals in the bar, of the one time a circus elephant was brought into the ballroom for a Maharaja's birthday party. "This place has stories," he said, his voice raspy with affection. "Real soul, but over the years it's become more corporate, more about process and less about people. The new managers, they come in with their spreadsheets and their metrics. They forget that the heart of a hotel isn't the thread count of the sheets. It's the feeling a person gets when they walk through that door. The feeling of being truly welcome." That phrase, the feeling of being truly welcome, became the cornerstone of her vision. The next week, she stood before Khalid Al-Jamil and a small hand-picked transition team in a temporary boardroom. She didn't present a financial plan or an operational strategy. She presented a philosophy. Mr. Al-Jamil bought the Beaumont because the Grand Excelsior lacked character. She began, her voice clear and confident. But the truth is, most hotels of this caliber suffer from the same problem. We train our staff in the mechanics of service, but not in the art of humanity. We teach them to be differential to wealth, which breeds resentment, and dismissive of anything else, which breeds arrogance. The result is a cold, transactional environment, not a welcoming sanctuary. She paused, looking at the faces in the room. "I propose a new foundation for every aspect of the Beaumont. I call it the dignity principle. It is built on a single simple idea. Dignity is not a privilege for our guests. It is a right for everyone who walks through our doors, guest and employee alike." For the next hour, she laid out her plan. It was revolutionary. The training program would be completely redesigned using immersive role-playing to teach emotional intelligence and cultural awareness. Staff would be empowered to solve problems on the spot without needing managerial approval. The rigid class-based hierarchy would be dismantled, replaced by a culture of mutual respect. Even the staff facilities would be a priority in the renovation. How can we ask our staff to provide a sanctuary for guests? She argued, if their own break room is a miserable windowless closet in the basement. She detailed her vision for the hotel's aesthetic. The generic art would be replaced by a curated collection, blending celebrated British masters with rising artists from the Middle East and North Africa. The silent, stuffy lounges would feature the soft, soulful notes of an oud player. In the evenings, the library would be filled not with decorative, leather-bound books, but with real works of literature, poetry, and history from across the globe. The hotel's signature scent would be a bespoke blend of English rose and Omani frankincense, a literal fusion of two cultures. When she finished, the room was silent. Khalid, who had listened without interruption, a small, unreadable smile on his face, finally spoke. "What you are describing, Isabella," he said slowly, "is not just a renovation, it is a resurrection. You have not just found the soul of this hotel, you have given it a new one. Proceed. Your budget is unlimited." The next 3 months were a blur of focused, exhilarating work. Isabella's life became a whirlwind of architectural plans, transatlantic flights, and endless meetings. She was no longer the quiet observer, but a decisive leader. Her intellectual rigor from Cambridge seamlessly merging with Khalid's sharp business instincts. She was involved in everything from choosing the weave of the new carpets to personally interviewing the new senior management hiring, not for their resumes, but for their demonstrable empathy. One crisp autumn afternoon, just a month before the grand reopening, she stood with Khalid on the newly completed rooftop terrace. The city of London spread out before them, a tapestry of history and ambition. The setting sun cast a golden glow on the Portland stone of the buildings. Below them, the Allgame Beaumont was a hive of final preparations, a place humming with a new kind of energy. "You look worried," Khaled observed, his voice gentle beside her. "I feel the weight of it all," Isabella confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've dismantled a century of tradition. We've invested a fortune in a philosophy. What if people don't understand what we're trying to do? What if they just want the same cold, predictable luxury we've replaced?" Khaled was silent for a moment, looking out at the skyline. "The day I walked into the Excelsior," he began, his voice reflective, "I had almost convinced myself that predictable luxury was all that was left. I had come to believe that in this modern world, true soulful hospitality was a relic of the past, something that couldn't be scaled or corporatized. I was testing the hotel, but really I was confirming my own cynicism." He turned to face her, his dark eyes sincere. "And then you approached me. In that moment of profound disrespect, you offered me profound respect. You didn't see my clothes or my accent. You saw a tired man, and you offered him comfort. You didn't follow a script, Isabella. You followed your heart. And in doing so, you gave me a new business model." He gestured around them at the elegant terrace, the glowing lights of the hotel, the city beyond. "This," he said, his voice filled with a quiet passion, "is not my empire. It is the physical manifestation of your single decent act. The dignity principle that now guides thousands of employees and will welcome millions of guests was not born in a boardroom. It was born in a teacup. Never doubt what we have built here. It is not made of marble and glass. It is made of kindness, and that is a foundation that will never crumble." Isabella looked out at the horizon, the last sliver of sun disappearing, leaving a city of glittering lights. The weight on her shoulders hadn't vanished, but it had transformed. It was no longer the weight of fear, but the weight of purpose. She had started this journey with a simple offer of tea to a stranger, an act that had cost her nothing but a moment of courage. And in return, it had given her back the world. Isabella's story is a powerful reminder that our true value is never defined by our job title or our circumstances, but by our character. It shows that the greatest opportunities often come when we choose empathy over judgment, and that one person's courage can rewrite not just their own story, but the stories of everyone around them. Khaled Al-Jamil wasn't looking for luxury. He was searching for a soul, and he found it in the kindness of a waitress who dared to see the man, not the clothes. Their story proves that true hospitality isn't about expensive carpets and chandeliers. It's about offering a person their dignity, a lesson that is truly priceless. If this story of unexpected triumph and the power of kindness resonated with you, please take a moment to hit the like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that inspire and move you. And now I'd love to hear from you. What do you think was the biggest mistake Mr. Harrison made? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching.